No, I don't want that in my life.
Freedom of speech is lacking a little bit.
Who's not telling the truth?
Today on BodyCam Bust the Lens, we're going to talk about some questions that are arising about the effectiveness of body cams worn by police officers in Canada. Greg, what are your thoughts? Do you think all Canadian police officers should be wearing body cams?
I will tell you this, that in the early days when they were proposing body cams for my department, I was one of the, no, I don't want that in my life. But having seen the results and the positives that have come from body cams, yes, I believe that all police officers should be wearing body cams.
Because apparently they've done some research here in Canada, and it's shown that there is potentially the reduction of use of force by police officers if they use body cams. And also it helps give civilians the sense of accountability with regards to the cops, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as use of force, I mean, if there is an officer who may be a little heavy-handed, that officer would, I would hope, check themselves if they knew that everything they were doing was being captured on video, and then turn it around on the citizens they're interacting with, knowing that they're being recorded. They may be a little bit more honest than they are when they're dealing with the cops, or maybe they may be less apt to physically attack the officers.
Now, there is one big difference between the States and in Canada. It's fairly easy for citizens to get footage of the body cam footage of the cops. But in Canada, it seems to be quite difficult to get access to the footage. So like in the States, you have the Freedom of Information Act. In Canada, we have something similar, but it seems to be a little bit more strict. What are your thoughts on that? The differences between the Canadian laws and the American laws with regards to having access to this footage for the public to see?
Well, I think that if they're going to implement body cams, they need to re-examine, like you said, we have the Freedom of Information Act. Maybe they need to implement something like that, because one of the goals of police wearing body cams is transparency. And if you're putting a big piece of tape over that transparency, then it's worthless. It serves no good.
In the States, you do have the freedom of speech, and as you know, in Canada,
yeah, not so much.
Freedom of speech is lacking a little bit, right?
Freedom of speech, as long as it doesn't offend, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And how do you define something that's offensive, right?
Exactly.
So when it comes to body cam footage, as we know, even if you get access to the footage, there are times where there are sections of the footage that is censored, like a lot of audio or even sometimes some footage. Can you talk about why someone or the public might receive the footage and the audio is censored, and why certain pieces of the footage is censored when you get the footage?
Well, I know earlier when the cameras were being implemented, footage wasn't even being released until the investigation was over, and they've kind of changed their stance on that now, especially if there's some type of use of force issue. They'll try to get that footage out as soon as possible. I'm speaking for my department right now, but I know a lot of agencies are like this. Because they're releasing that footage earlier, like before maybe a case has even went to a preliminary hearing, there may be elements of that video footage that they do not want to show the public because it could cause, bias or prejudice with a jury pool. And also there is, concern for people's privacy, so there may be sensitive issues they just don't feel that the public needs to even see, that, protecting that person that's on video.
And why is it that I've seen some footage where the police are interrogating a suspect and the audio is muted?
Again, that's that footage was taken during the interrogation, so all that audio is evidence. So if it's not gone to trial yet, they're not going to release any of it. The audio is going to be redacted.
Do you think there could be a situation where someone went through the the court system is in jail, but they would still want to keep the audio muted so criminals don't learn or figure out the tactics that cops use during interrogations, or that's a non-issue?
Yeah, I wouldn't see that as an issue. There be maybe other more involving the criminal justice system issues. Maybe there's an appeal pending by the defense. So again, if that would be evidence, or that would be something that the defense could use an appeal. The public was, they witnessed this interrogation, and it tainted our case, the defense's case. So I most likely it would be for more of the criminal justice reasons why they would redact audio during an interrogation.
For everyone here in Canada and for the officers, what would you recommend our Canadian officers? What would be the best way for them to use the body cams?
And on that note, I will say that the body cams have turned into a very kind of a multi-tool for cops in the field now, where before the whole thought was you're hitting record and it's recording the actions you're taking. Now officers are using them to help them in their interview. So because like when I was in patrol, my interviews, either you could record something on tape and then kind of transfer that to paper, or you just take notes. And the body cams being used during an interrogation are very, very beneficial, because you can, if you wanted to, you could write down the questions and answers verbatim. You have it all right there. And also you get to see body language that the suspect you're interviewing is using.
And do you think if we implement this across Canada, there should be repercussions if a cop forgets to turn on their body camera?
So there's a learning curve. And I can tell you this, there's a learning curve. And I have a friend that this happened to. Right now, you have to figure that these officers, especially these senior officers, they don't have body cameras, so they haven't developed that muscle memory of turning it on. So there definitely needs to be a grace period, and really hammer in the training. But then after that grace period has expired, yeah, I don't have a problem with discipline.
So I guess something as simple as before you exit the car, click the button, right?
Yeah, and obviously I think, you need to use some common sense, and it needs to be a case-by-case situation, because, imagine you're, a police officer driving a car, and all of a sudden someone flags you down, you're pulling over. Now that person that's flagging you down is charging your car at a high speed. You may not even have time to think of hitting that body cam. So whoever's investigating like the possible discipline just needs to use a little bit of common sense, because some of the reasons are very explainable. And I have a buddy who had been kind of basically given 2 warnings because he wasn't hitting the body cam. And we didn't really have a discipline, it wasn't in writing yet, a policy for that. But they told him, if you get into another incident and you don't have your body camera on, there's going to be some discipline coming your way. And he got into a really horrible situation and managed to get his body cam on, but it was right at the last minute. But it was enough to kind of pull him out of the fire as far as discipline is concerned.
So all in all, I personally think all cops here in Canada should be wearing it. There's quite a bit of controversy, especially here in Montreal, Quebec region. Some issues of police accountability. I think this would clear up the air, and it would reduce the amount of hatred towards the cops, personally.
Well, that's one of the real pluses that we've noticed with the body cams is it's as far as the citizen complaints are concerned, because the way it was before, you could have an interaction with a citizen and be above, just doing everything per policy, conducting yourself in a very professional manner, but the citizen was angry because they received a citation or whatever. and then they turn around and file a complaint. At that point, it's basically literally he said, she said, or whatever, he said, and it's up to the investigator who's investigating this complaint to kind of determine who's not telling the truth. Well, with a body cam, there's been several false citizen complaints that have surfaced. You know, the citizen made a complaint alleging the officer did X, Y, or Z, and then the officer was exonerated. They didn't do any of those things. And then there's, you know, they can file charges against the complainant for filing a false complaint. So that's been a real benefit for officers. I think it's a benefit that a lot of officers don't think of.
So basically, for our Canadian friends out there, if you're dealing with a cop who has a body cam on, you better be honest and not make a false complaint.
And another thing, as far as use of force, you mentioned that. Usually the use of force videos we're used to seeing on the news came from a cell phone, you know, someone's smartphone. And oftentimes they weren't there to see what led to that officer now rolling around on the street with the citizen. And when you see, you know, what started like from A to Z, basically, it paints a very different picture. Because I say this all the time, when an officer goes hands-on with somebody, it's always going to look ugly. And if you're only seeing a snippet, like the end of that confrontation, it looks abusive. But when you see, again, oftentimes, what led to that officer going hands-on, it completely paints a different picture. So another benefit for body cams.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as always, Greg, thanks for your insight. And for those of you who are new to the channel, please subscribe and check out these other great videos.